No one in the auction hall wanted Emily Carter until the moment the most dangerous king in the North looked at her scar and forgot every other Omega in the room. She stood on the last white platform beneath a ring of cold silver lights, barefoot on polished stone that felt colder than snow, with her wrists free but her name already sold to shame. Every other Omega had been bid on before midnight. Pretty ones with soft scents, noble ones with clean bloodlines, quiet ones whose packs still claimed them. Emily was the only one left, and the silence around her was louder than any insult. The auctioneer smiled as if her humiliation were part of the entertainment. Lot 17, he called, tapping his silver cane against the floor. Emily Carter of Ash Hollow. Scarred Omega. Previously rejected. No standing pack protection. No confirmed fertility record. Marked unsuitable by former mate testimony. A ripple of whispers moved through the noble rows. Emily kept her chin lifted, but her fingers trembled against the thin fabric of her old white dress. They had chosen the dress on purpose. Its neckline left the silver scar across her shoulder visible to every alpha in the hall. The scar curved from her collarbone toward the top of her chest like moonlight trapped under damaged skin, bright enough that people stared even when they pretended not to. Someone laughed softly. Another alpha leaned back in his chair and said, "Bad omen." Emily's throat went dry. She had heard worse in Ash Hollow. She had heard Mason Reed call her damaged in front of the pack that once raised her. She had heard Vanessa Carter whisper that no respectable alpha would want a scarred Omega beside him. But hearing strangers measure her worth in front of an auction board made the old wound feel new. The auctioneer lifted his hand. Opening bid, 10,000 crown dollars. No paddle rose. Not one. Emily stared past the rows of velvet seats, past the golden masks, past the cold faces of people who had come to purchase futures while pretending it was tradition. 10,000 dropped to 5. 5 dropped to 1. Still nothing. Her heartbeat hammered so hard she wondered if they could hear it from the front row. The auctioneer's smile thinned. Surely someone has use for a house Omega. More laughter. Emily's breath caught, but she did not look down. If she looked down, Ash Hollow would win again. If she broke, Mason would be right. The auctioneer sighed theatrically and turned to mark the board. No bids. Lot 17 will be recorded as unsold. The word struck her harder than rejected ever had. Unsold meant unwanted even by men who had come to buy. Unsold meant the scar had spoken louder than her name. The silver lights above her flickered, and for one strange second, the scar on her shoulder warmed beneath the fabric. Emily froze. She pressed her hand lightly over it, but the warmth vanished as quickly as it came. In the back row, Mason Reed stood beside Vanessa, his expression calm, almost relieved. He had brought the testimony that ruined her, and now he was watching it work. Vanessa tilted her head, pale hair shining under the chandeliers, and mouthed one word Emily could read from across the hall. Nothing. Emily swallowed the ache in her throat. The auctioneer lifted his cane to close the sale. Then every candle in the room bent toward the entrance. The great black doors at the rear of the auction hall opened with a sound like thunder rolling under stone. The laughter died first, then the whispers, then the music. Every alpha in the room stood so quickly the velvet seats scraped backward. Emily turned her head, and the breath left her body. A tall man in a black royal coat stepped into the hall, silver embroidery catching the light like frost along the edges of his cloak. His face was sharp and controlled, his jaw set, his icy gray eyes colder than the mountains beyond Blackwood territory. A dark crown ring gleamed on his hand. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood had entered the mating auction. No one was supposed to look directly at him for too long, but Emily could not look away. He moved down the center aisle without acknowledging the bows, the gasps, or the trembling auctioneer. His gaze passed over the noble Omegas already claimed, over the rich Alphas, over Mason and Vanessa, and stopped on Emily. Not on the board, not on her price, on her scar. The crown ring on his hand gave one dark silver pulse. Emily's scar answered with a faint white glow beneath her palm. Adrian Blackwood went utterly still. The auctioneer's voice cracked. "Your Majesty, we did not expect royal attendance tonight." Adrian did not look at him. His eyes remained on Emily, and for the first time that night, she did not feel like a thing being inspected. She felt like a question someone powerful had finally heard. His voice carried through the silent hall, low and dangerous. Why is no one bidding on her? The question did not sound like curiosity. It sounded like a verdict being delayed only long enough for someone foolish to answer it. Emily Carter stood frozen on the auction platform with one hand still pressed over the scar beneath her dress, feeling the faint warmth fade as Alpha King Adrian Blackwood watched her from the center aisle. No one moved. The noble alphas who had laughed at her lowered their eyes. The auctioneer swallowed so hard the silver chain at his throat shifted against his collar. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "the young woman has been properly presented. The hall has declined to bid." Adrian's gaze did not leave Emily. "That was not my question." His voice was quiet, but the room seemed to shrink around it. Emily's breath caught. She had imagined many endings for this night. Being recorded as unsold. Being sent to a servant house. Being returned to Ash Hollow in worse shame than before. She had not imagined the Alpha King of Blackwood asking why the world had decided she was worthless. The auctioneer looked toward the rows of bidders, searching for rescue among men who suddenly found the floor fascinating. "Her record is unfavorable." Adrian took one step closer. "Records are written by people." A murmur passed through the hall. Emily felt it move over her skin like cold air. Adrian Blackwood was not only an alpha. He was a king whose territory stretched across the northern mountains, the border forests, and the old moonstone roads. Men did not argue with him unless they had enough power to survive the answer. The auctioneer's fingers tightened around his cane. Her former pack submitted testimony. Rejection history. Scent instability. Scar classification. Possible curse association. Emily's stomach dropped. There it was again. Curse. The word had followed her for years, soft in hallways, sharp in judgment rooms, cruelest when spoken by people who did not believe they were cruel. Adrian finally turned his head toward the bitter rows. Who submitted the testimony? No one answered. Emily knew before anyone moved. She felt Mason Reed stand from the back row like an old bruise coming to the surface. "I did, Your Majesty." Mason's voice was steady, respectful, practiced. He wore the formal dark blue coat of Ash Hollow, his alpha badge shining over his heart. Vanessa Carter stood beside him in pale silver, beautiful and untouched by shame. Emily's fingers curled in her skirt. Adrian looked at Mason once, and the whole hall felt the temperature drop. "You are her former mate?" Mason inclined his head. "I was assigned to her by pack match when we were younger. I formally rejected the bond after the scar appeared, and after the pack healer found no stable Luna signs." A few nobles nodded as if that explained everything. Emily stared at the edge of the stage, refusing to look at Mason long enough for him to see what his words still did. Adrian asked, "And the scar appeared how?" Mason hesitated. It was small, but Emily saw it. Vanessa saw it too. Her smile tightened. "There was an incident during a moon gathering," Mason said. Emily wandered beyond the marked grounds. When she returned, she had the scar and no clear memory. After that, Ash Hollow suffered poor hunts, failed matings, and 3 broken alliances. The elders believed the omen was clear. Emily's throat went dry. They had never said it that plainly before strangers. Bad weather had become her fault. Failed politics had become her fault. Men choosing badly had become proof that her body carried ruin. Adrian turned back to Emily. The anger in his face was controlled so tightly it looked almost calm. "Did anyone ask you what happened that night?" The question hit her harder than the accusations. Emily opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her heart hammered. The last time someone had asked what she remembered, she had been 12 and crying in a healer's room while elders spoke over her. After that, no one asked. They only recorded. Adrian waited. Not impatiently, not kindly in a way that made a spectacle of kindness. He simply gave the silence room to belong to her. Emily forced air into her lungs. No. The word was barely louder than a whisper, yet it carried through the hall because no one dared breathe over it. Adrian's jaw tightened. Vanessa stepped forward with a delicate smile. "Your Majesty, Emily has always struggled under attention. Ash Hollow cared for her as long as we could, but a scarred Omega with no reliable signs is a risk to any bloodline. Surely you understand why no respectable alpha would gamble on her." Emily felt her face burn. Adrian looked at Vanessa then, and the noblewoman's smile faltered. "Respectable," he repeated. "Is that what you call men who need a frightened woman displayed under lights before they feel safe rejecting her?" Vanessa went pale. Mason's expression hardened. "Your Majesty, With respect, she was brought here under lawful auction procedure. Lawful is not the same as honorable. The words landed like iron. Emily looked at Adrian before she could stop herself. He was still several yards away, still impossibly distant in rank and power, but something in his gaze had changed. He was not looking at the scar as damage. He was studying it as if it had answered a question his own life had been asking for years. The crown ring on his hand pulsed again, darker this time. Beneath Emily's palm, her scar warmed in response. She flinched. Adrian saw it. So did Lord Victor Hale, seated near the front beneath a black council sash. His eyes sharpened with sudden alarm. Adrian lowered his voice, but every ear strained toward him. What did they do to make every alpha in this hall afraid to bid on her? The auctioneer opened his mouth and closed it again. Mason looked away. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her fan. Victor rose smoothly from his seat. Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss this matter privately. Adrian did not look at him. No, the hall went still. Emily felt the entire room tilt toward the king's next words. Adrian took one final step toward the platform, close enough now that Emily could see the silver threads in his black coat and the cold fury in his eyes. If her shame was made public, he said, then so will the reason for it. Mason Reed stepped out from the bitter rows as if the auction hall belonged to him, and Emily Carter felt the years between them collapse into one cold breath. She remembered him at 17, standing beside the Ash Hollow elders with his eyes fixed anywhere but on her face. She remembered the rejection ceremony, the quiet relief of the pack when he said the words cleanly, without anger, as if ending her future were a practical decision. Now he stood before the Alpha King in a dark blue coat and gave the same calm expression to a room full of strangers. The scar appeared after a Forbidden Moon gathering, Mason said. Emily was found near the old boundary stones. She could not explain where she had gone. After that, her scent changed, her wolf presence weakened, and the pack suffered repeated misfortune. Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of her dress. That was not the whole truth. It had never been the whole truth. She remembered cold grass under her knees, white light between the trees, and her mother's old pendant burning against her skin. She remembered waking with adults shouting over her, and Mason looking at the silver mark on her shoulder like it had made her someone else. But she did not remember enough to defend herself. That had always been the cruelty of it. A half-memory had become a full accusation. Vanessa Carter glided forward beside Mason, her pale gown shimmering under the chandeliers. She had been adopted into Ash Hollow after Emily's mother died, raised in the same house, but never treated like a burden. Vanessa's smile was soft, careful, and poisonous. My sister was never intentionally cruel, she said, as though kindness required her to lie. But strange things followed her. Our best hunting party lost its way the week after the scar. 2 promising mate bonds failed before ceremony. The elders tried to protect the pack. Mason did what any responsible alpha would do. Emily's breath caught. Sister. Vanessa only used that word when it made her sound generous. Adrian Blackwood's gaze moved from Vanessa to Emily. Is she your sister? Emily swallowed. Adopted. Vanessa's smile flickered. We were raised together. That was not what I asked. The hall tightened around the king's voice. Vanessa lowered her eyes, but Emily saw the anger beneath her lashes. Mason stepped in, his tone firmer now. Your Majesty, this is not personal cruelty. A mate bond with a scarred Omega could have endangered my line. I rejected the bond legally. Ash Hollow submitted honest records. The auction was the only remaining path for her placement. Placement? Emily almost laughed, but the sound would have broken inside her. People placed furniture. Servants. Burdens. Not daughters. Not girls who had once sat by the window at night wondering if their wolf was silent because it hated them too. Adrian's jaw flexed. You keep naming the scar as if it answered for her. Mason looked toward the platform. For a heartbeat, his composure cracked, and Emily saw the boy who had once walked beside her through summer fields before fear made him cruel. Because everyone saw what happened after it appeared. Everyone saw results, Adrian said. Not cause. Lord Victor Hale moved closer to the auction table, his black council sash catching the light. Your Majesty, Ash Hollow's testimony was reviewed by licensed pack authorities. The scar was classified under Cursed Omen guidelines. The phrase sent whispers through the hall. Cursed Omen. Emily felt her face grow hot. The auctioneer seized the moment, eager to reclaim control. As stated in the record, the mark is considered undesirable for mating purposes. No bidder is obligated to accept spiritual liability. Spiritual liability. That was what her life had become in ink. Emily stared down at the polished stone below the platform and forced herself to breathe. Her chest felt too tight. Her scar warmed again beneath her palm, faint but steady, like a coal covered in ash. Adrian noticed the movement. His eyes sharpened. "Show me the classification seal." The auctioneer blinked. "Your Majesty?" "The document." A clerk rushed forward with a leather folder. The auctioneer opened it with unsteady hands and presented the page. Adrian did not take it. He only looked. The black crown ring on his hand pulsed once, then again. The ink on the classification seal shivered. Emily felt the scar burn brighter, and her breath caught so sharply that several nobles turned toward her. Vanessa stepped back half an inch. Mason stared. Victor's face went still. The seal on the page began to bleed silver light, not enough to tear, but enough to prove it was reacting to something in the room. Adrian lifted his hand slowly. The ring darkened. Emily's scar answered with a thin white glow through the fabric at her shoulder. The auction hall fell silent. For the first time, no one was looking at her with disgust. They were looking with fear. Victor spoke quickly. "Old ink often reacts to royal artifacts. It means nothing." Adrian finally looked at him. "Then why did you look frightened before anyone else did?" Victor's mouth closed. Emily's heart hammered. She wanted to step back, but there was nowhere to go on the platform. Mason's voice came quieter now. "Emily, what is that?" The question nearly broke her. After years of naming her scar for her, now he expected her to explain it. She lifted her chin, though her fingers trembled. "I do not know. None of you ever asked me to know." The words moved through the hall like a crack across ice. Adrian's expression changed, not soft exactly, but certain. He turned to the auctioneer. "You presented her as cursed based on a seal that reacts to my crown ring and a scar no one bothered to understand." The auctioneer's face drained. Vanessa whispered, "That does not change what she is." Adrian looked back at Emily, and the glow beneath her hand brightened as if hearing him before he spoke. "No," he said. "It changes what was done to her." The auctioneer stood with the classification document shaking in his hands, and for the first time that night, the man who had spoken of Emily Carter like a damaged object seemed afraid of the object looking back. The silver glow from her scar faded to a thin pulse beneath her palm, but the entire hall had seen enough. Men who had refused to bid now stared as if the platform had become dangerous ground. Vanessa Carter's face had lost its perfect softness. Mason Reed looked between Emily and the glowing seal, his mouth slightly open, as though the girl he had rejected had suddenly become a language he could not read. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood turned toward the auction table. "Open the bid." The words struck the hall with such force that even the candles seemed to steady themselves. The auctioneer blinked. "Your Majesty?" Adrian's voice lowered. "You heard me." Emily's breath caught. No. Her first thought was not relief. It was panic. A bid meant ownership. A bid meant another document with her name written under someone else's power. She had spent the whole night praying not to be bought, and now the most powerful alpha in the north was asking to enter the auction. Her fingers trembled against the scar. Adrian looked at her then, and something in his expression changed, as if he understood the fear before she could speak it. "No one will touch you," he said, not to the hall, but to her. The words did not erase the platform beneath her feet, but they gave her enough air to keep standing. The auctioneer swallowed and lifted the silver hammer again. "Opening bid for Lot 17, Emily Carter of Ash Hollow, stands at 1,000 crown dollars. A few nervous laughs tried to rise and failed. Adrian removed the black crown ring from his hand. The hall inhaled as one. Even Victor Hale went completely still. The ring was not jewelry. Every alpha in the room knew it. The crown ring carried Blackwood authority, border treaties, royal debt seals, and inheritance power older than most pack lines. Adrian placed it on the auction table. It landed softly, but the sound traveled through the hall like a bell. "Blackwood Royal Seal," Adrian said. The auctioneer went pale. "Your Majesty, that is not a standard bid." "It is now." Victor stepped forward sharply. "Adrian." The use of the king's name sent a ripple through the nobles. Adrian did not look away from the auction table. "Careful, Lord Hale." Victor forced a bow, but anger tightened his voice. Your Majesty, you cannot place a royal seal against an Omega whose status is uncertain. Adrian finally turned his head. Her status was certain enough when you allowed her to be displayed. Victor's jaw hardened. A crown seal carries border value. You understand what you are offering. I do. Then the court must witness that the Alpha King of Blackwood has just bid the legal weight of a border kingdom on a rejected scarred Omega. The phrase was meant to shame. Instead, it emptied the room of breath. Emily stared at the black ring on the table. A kingdom. Not coins. Not pity. Not a careless rescue tossed from a powerful man to a ruined girl. A kingdom's weight placed publicly where no one had offered even $1 crown. The auction board above the stage flickered, unable to calculate the value. Lines of gold numbers appeared, vanished, and appeared again as the system tried to measure what Adrian had done. The auctioneer's hand shook so badly the hammer tapped once against the wood by accident. No one mistook it for a sale. Do we have any counterbid? He asked, his voice barely audible. The hall remained silent. This silence was different from the first. The first silence had said Emily was worth nothing. This one said no one dared stand against the king who had named her worth before them all. Vanessa looked as if she could not decide whether to glare at Emily or at Adrian. Mason lowered his eyes. Victor watched the crown ring with a hatred too sharp to hide. Emily's heart hammered. She should have felt triumphant, but the fear remained, tangled with something more fragile. Hope could hurt worse than shame if it turned out to be another kind of trap. Adrian stepped closer to the platform, but stopped before the first stair. He did not reach for her. He did not order her down. Emily Carter, he said, and the sound of her full name in his voice made her throat tighten. Do you understand what is being bid? She shook her head once because lying would have been easier, and she was too tired for easy things. No, then hear it from me before anyone twists it. I am bidding for every contract tied to your name. Auction claim, pact debt, rejection penalty, transfer right, placement authority. If this hall accepts my seal, no. One here keeps a chain on you. The word chain hit Victor's face like a slap. That is not how auction law is interpreted. Adrian's eyes turned cold. It is how Blackwood law will interpret it when my seal pays the price. Emily's breath trembled. You are not bidding to claim me. The question escaped before she could stop it. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably, scandalized that a girl on a platform had spoken so directly to a king. Adrian answered as if no one else existed. No, the room stilled. I am bidding to make sure no one else can. The scar on Emily's shoulder warmed again, brighter this time, and the crown ring answered with a dark silver pulse. The auction board flashed once, then burned with a single impossible number. Blackwood royal seal accepted. The auctioneer lifted the hammer, his face white. Final call. No one spoke. The hammer fell. The sound cracked through the hall. Emily Carter, who had been unsold before the world, had just been purchased for the price of a kingdom, and the man who paid it had not stepped onto the platform to take her. He stood below it, waiting for her to decide whether to come down. Emily Carter did not move when the hammer fell. The sound still echoed through the auction hall, but her feet stayed locked to the cold platform as if the stage itself had become the last piece of a life she understood. Every eye was on her now, not with mockery, not even with pity, with calculation, fear, and disbelief. A few minutes earlier, no one had wanted her for 1,000 crown dollars. Now the Blackwood royal seal rested on the auction table, and the board above her head still burned with the impossible value of a border kingdom ransom. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood waited at the bottom of the steps, his hand empty where the crown ring had been, his face controlled but his eyes fixed on hers. He had said he was not bidding to claim her. He had said he was making sure no one else could. But Emily had learned long ago that powerful people often use gentle words while holding locked doors behind their backs. Her fingers trembled against her dress. What happens now? She asked. The auctioneer answered before Adrian could. Ownership transfer must be certified. The buyer receives full mating rights upon completion of payment and biological verification unless modified by royal provision. Emily's stomach dropped so hard she nearly stepped back. There it was, the hidden hook beneath every polished tradition. Full rights, completion, verification. Her breath caught in her throat. Adrian turned toward the auctioneer slowly. The entire hall seemed to lean away from his silence. Read the modification. The auctioneer blinked. Your Majesty? Read what my seal requires." The clerk at the table hurried through the glowing legal text now spreading from the crown ring across the contract page. His eyes widened. Royal provision entered. All claims attached to Emily Carter are to be acquired for dissolution, not transfer. Auction claim, Ash Hollow debt claim, rejection penalty, housing penalty, placement authority, mating auction classification, and all future pack recovery rights are hereby purchased by Blackwood Crown Authority for immediate termination. The words were so unfamiliar that Emily needed several breaths to understand them. Dissolution, termination, not transfer. Her knees felt weak. Mason Reed looked up sharply from the bitter rose. Ash Hollow debt claim cannot be terminated without pack consent. Adrian did not raise his voice. It can when the pack accepted royal payment. Mason's mouth closed. Vanessa's face twisted with disbelief. You spent a kingdom's weight to erase her paperwork. Adrian looked at her. No, I spent it to erase your access to her. The hall went silent. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, but it did not steady the sudden ache there. No one had ever described her freedom as something worth buying back. Lord Victor Hale stepped forward, his expression composed but tight at the edges. Your Majesty, such an act sets a dangerous precedent. If every rejected Omega can be removed from contractual consequence by royal sentiment, pack law loses authority. Adrian's gaze hardened. If pack law depends on selling rejected women to preserve authority, then it deserves to lose more than that. A murmur moved through the room, sharper and more frightened than before. The auctioneer stared at the contract as black and silver fire began to crawl along its edges. Your Majesty, the document is self-executing. Good. Emily watched the flames with a strange hollowness in her chest. The contract did not burn like paper. It unraveled, line by line. Ash Hollow claim disappeared first, then rejection debt, then placement authority, then mating auction classification. Each phrase turned to silver ash before vanishing into the air. Emily's name remained until the end, glowing alone at the center of the page, and for one terrifying second she thought even that would be taken. Instead, the crown ring pulsed, and her name lifted off the contract in white light before settling into the air above her palm. Free status restored. Emily stared at those words until they blurred. Her throat tightened. The auctioneer lowered his head. By royal provision, Emily Carter is no longer under auction authority. No longer under auction authority. She had not known a sentence could feel like a door opening. Adrian turned back to her. The stairs are yours to take or refuse. Emily looked at the steps between them. Only 5 steps separated the platform from the floor, but they felt longer than the road from Ash Hollow to this hall. If she walked down, everyone would say the Alpha King had saved her. If she stayed, they might say she was ungrateful or afraid. But for the first time, the choice was not being ripped from her hands. She gathered the front of her dress and stepped down once. The hall held its breath. A second step, then a third. Her legs shook so badly she feared she might fall, but Adrian did not reach for her without permission. He only stood there, steady as a mountain in winter, letting her cross the distance herself. When she reached the floor, he inclined his head to her. Not ownership, acknowledgement. Emily's eyes stung, and she hated that so many people were there to see it. Why? She whispered. Adrian's answer came low enough that it felt meant for her alone, though the silent hall caught every word. Because everyone here watched them price your shame, and I wanted them to witness the cost of ending it. The scar on her shoulder suddenly warmed, stronger than before. Emily gasped and pressed her hand over it. White light spread between her fingers, thin as dawn. The burned contract ash rose from the table and spiraled toward her scar, disappearing into the silver mark as if the severed claims had unlocked something sleeping beneath her skin. Victor Hale's expression changed from anger to alarm. Adrian saw it. So did Emily. For one breath, the auction hall was no longer looking at a freed Omega. They were looking at a secret waking in public. The crown ring on the table pulsed again, and Emily heard a woman's voice in the back of her memory, soft as moonlight and urgent as a warning. Hide the fire until the black-crowned wolf finds you. The voice in Emily Carter's memory faded before she could catch it, leaving only the warmth of the scar beneath her palm and the terrible stillness of the auction hall around her. Hide the fire until the black-crowned wolf finds you. She did not know whose voice it was, but it made something ache behind her ribs, old and tender, like a door she had forgotten was locked. Across the room, the burned contract ash had vanished, the auction board had gone dark, and the black crown ring still rested on the table with one last pulse of silver light. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood washed her face, not the scar this time. "Can you walk?" he asked. The question was so simple that Emily almost did not know how to answer it. No one had asked whether she could walk when she was dragged to the platform. No one had asked whether she wanted to stand under those lights. She nodded, though her knees still felt weak. "Yes." Adrian turned to the hall. "The auction is over for her." Victor Hale stepped into his path. "Your Majesty, protocol requires immediate court verification after a royal purchase of disputed status." Emily's throat tightened at the word purchase. Adrian's expression did not change, but the air around him sharpened. There was no purchase of her person. There was a termination of claims. Victor gave a thin smile. "A legal distinction the council will need to examine. Then examine it after she is no longer standing in the room that displayed her." Adrian took his crown ring from the table and slid it back onto his hand. The scar on Emily's shoulder warmed again, almost answering the motion. Victor saw her flinch. His eyes narrowed. That reaction alone proves she should remain under supervised observation. Adrian stepped slightly between Victor and Emily, not touching her, not trapping her, only blocking the council lord's stare. "You have supervised enough for one night." The hall went silent. Emily felt every noble watching as Adrian turned back to her and gestured toward the aisle. "You may leave through the front doors, the side doors, or not at all until you are ready. My carriage is outside if you want protection from this hall." Want. The word frightened her more than command would have. Command was familiar. Want required her to find herself inside the fear. Emily looked back once. Mason Reed stood near the bitter rose, his face pale, his badge catching the candlelight. Vanessa Carter stared at the scar as if it had betrayed her. Neither spoke. For years, they had given her names. Damaged, Omen, Burden. Now they had no name for what they had witnessed. Emily lifted her chin and walked down the center aisle beside Adrian Blackwood, not behind him. Nobles lowered their heads as he passed, but several glanced at her with uneasy curiosity, as if the girl they had refused to bid on had become a warning they did not understand. Outside, the winter air hit her face so sharply she nearly gasped. Snow drifted over the stone courtyard, quiet and white beneath the black sky. A royal carriage waited at the steps, its doors carved with the Blackwood wolf crest. Emily stopped before it. The carriage looked safer than the auction hall and more dangerous because of it. Adrian noticed. "You do not have to enter." She looked at him. "If I do not, you will still be free. I will still have ended the claims. I will assign guards only if you request them. I will not send you back to Ash Hollow." Her breath trembled. "And if I do enter? Then I take you to Blackwood Castle, where my healer can look at your scar, and you may leave after sunrise if that is what you choose." Emily searched his face for the hidden hook. Men always had one. A price. A condition. A debt dressed as kindness. "You paid a kingdom's worth of power," she said. "For a girl you would let walk away?" Adrian's eyes held hers, cold gray softened only by restraint. "For a woman no one should have been allowed to sell." The words moved through her like the first warmth after freezing. Emily turned toward the carriage and stepped inside. Adrian followed only after she sat, taking the opposite seat instead of the one beside her. The door closed, muffling the world. For a moment, there was only the sound of wheels over snow and the quiet crackle of a small lantern swinging overhead. Emily sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, aware of the space between them, aware that he had not crossed it. Adrian removed his gloves slowly and set them beside him. The crown ring gleamed black and silver on his hand. Her scar pulsed in answer. This time the light was bright enough to shine through the neckline of her dress. Emily gasped and grabbed the fabric. Adrian's posture changed instantly, alert but still. "May I look?" She almost said no because fear rose first. Then she remembered the platform, the contract burning, the way he had waited at the stairs. She nodded once. Adrian leaned forward only enough to see the glow, keeping his hands to himself. The scar was no longer shaped only like a wound. Thin lines of white fire branched from it like roots under moonlit ice. His eyes darkened with recognition and something close to dread. "That is not a curse mark." Emily's heart hammered. "Then what is it?" Before he could answer, the carriage lantern flickered out. Moonlight filled the cabin. The crown ring on Adrian's hand pulsed, and the scar answered with a clear white flare. The woman's voice returned in Emily's memory, stronger this time, soft with love and fear. Hide the fire until the black-crowned wolf finds you. Emily looked at Adrian through the moonlit dark, her breath caught in her throat. I think, she whispered, someone hid something inside me. The carriage reached Blackwood Castle just before dawn, when the mountains were still black against the sky and the snow in the courtyard glowed faintly under the last moonlight. Emily Carter stepped down from the carriage with Adrian Blackwood a careful distance beside her, his dark cloak moving in the wind, his crown ring still pulsing softly, as if it had not finished answering the scar beneath her dress. The castle rose above them with towers of black stone and silver windows, beautiful in a way that made her feel too plain to stand near it. She clutched the borrowed cloak around her shoulders and tried not to think of the auction platform, the hammer falling, or the voice in her memory that had called Adrian the black-crowned wolf. Servants lined the entrance hall when they entered, but Adrian lifted one hand before any of them could bow too deeply or stare too long. No questions, he said. No whispers. She is under royal protection and personal consent. The words moved through the hall like law. Emily's throat tightened. Personal consent. No one at Ash Hollow had ever used those words near her name. Adrian led her not to a bedroom, not to a claim chamber, not to any place the auctioneer's language had made her fear, but to a quiet healing room on the east side of the castle. Shelves of old books lined the walls. Bowls of moonstone water glowed on a long table. Snow tapped softly against the tall windows. An elderly woman in a blue robe stood waiting beside the fire, her silver hair braided over one shoulder, her eyes sharp with intelligence. Nora Whitman, Adrian said. Royal healer. Nora looked at Emily, then at Adrian, then back to Emily's shoulder as if the scar had called her name before Emily could speak. Her face changed. Not fear first. Grief. Child, Nora whispered. May I see it? Emily's fingers closed around the cloak. Her body remembered every room where people had asked to inspect her and then decided what she was worth. Adrian moved toward the door. I will wait outside. Emily looked at him quickly. You do not have to leave. The words surprised them both. Adrian paused, his expression unreadable except for the careful restraint in his eyes. Then I will stand where you can see me. He moved to the far side of the room, near the window, hands visible, giving her space without abandoning her. Emily breathed out slowly and lowered the cloak enough for Nora to see the silver scar. The healer did not touch it. She only lifted a moonstone lamp closer. The scar responded at once. White fire spread through the lines like roots waking beneath ice. Nora's hand flew to her mouth. Moon preserve us. Emily's heart hammered. What is it? Nora turned to the shelves with sudden urgency, pulling down an old leather book bound in white thread. Not a curse. Her voice shook. Not a wound. Not in the way Ash Hollow named it. Adrian's eyes sharpened from across the room. Nora. The healer opened the book to a faded illustration of a silver mark shaped like branching fire across a woman's shoulder. Emily stared at it until the room seemed to tilt. The drawing looked almost exactly like her scar. Beneath it, in old ink, were the words Moonfire line. There was once a bloodline tied to the Blackwood throne, Nora said. Not subordinate to it. Not above it. Bound beside it. The Moonfire heirs carried a rare gift. They could quiet curses laid against Alpha Kings and burn false claims from blood and law. Emily touched the scar with trembling fingers. That is impossible. Nora's eyes softened. Many true things become impossible after powerful people erase them. Adrian stepped closer, stopping when Emily's shoulders tensed. My family curse, he said quietly. The shadow sickness in the Blackwood line. It has worsened for years. Emily looked at him. For the first time, she saw the exhaustion beneath the king's control, the faint darkness at the edge of his aura, the way even his wolf seemed to stand guard over something wounded inside him. Your curse reacted to me? It went silent when I saw you. His voice was low. For the first time since I was crowned. Nora turned another page, revealing a family tree with names scratched away, so violently only fragments remained. One line survived near the bottom, written in pale ink. Last known Moonfire daughter hidden after the Northern Succession conflict. Emily's breath caught. The room blurred. My mother used to wear a pendant with white thread. Nora looked up sharply. Do you remember her name? Marin. Carter. The book snapped shut by itself. The fire in the hearth leaned toward Emily. Nora sank to one knee, tears bright in her eyes. Marin was not a servant line widow. She was the last confirmed guardian of Moonfire blood. Emily stepped back, shaking her head. No, I was rejected. I was sold. I was nothing to them. Adrian's voice came from near the window, rough but steady. You were hidden from them. The words landed in the deepest part of her. Hidden, not ruined. Hidden, not empty. Hidden, not cursed. Before Emily could answer, the healing room doors opened without a knock. Victor Hale stood outside with two council witnesses in black robes, his face smooth and cold. Your Majesty, he said, eyes fixed on Emily's glowing scar. The council requires immediate custody of the girl. Adrian turned fully toward him, and the room darkened around the edges of his alpha power. No, Victor's smile thinned. If she carries Moonfire blood, then she is not merely an Omega. She is a threat to the throne. Nora rose slowly, clutching the book to her chest. No, Lord Hale. She was never cursed. Victor's eyes flashed. Nora looked at Emily, then at Adrian, and spoke the truth the entire castle seemed to hear. She was hidden because she may be the only cure your king has left. The healing room changed the moment Victor Hale said custody. The moonstone water dimmed in its bowls, the fire bent low, and every book on Nora Whitman's shelves seemed to hold its breath. Emily Carter stood near the examination table with her cloak half fallen from her shoulders, the Moonfire scar glowing beneath the edge of her dress like a secret that had grown tired of being hidden. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel each beat under the mark. Only hours ago, Victor had watched her on an auction stage and called her status uncertain. Now that Nora had named her bloodline, he wanted her locked away. Adrian Blackwood moved before Emily could step back. He did not touch her, but he placed himself between her and the council witnesses with such quiet finality that the two men in black robes stopped at the threshold. You do not enter this room without her permission, Adrian said. Victor's mouth tightened. Your Majesty, with respect, this is no longer a private healing matter. If the girl carries Moonfire blood, she may influence the Blackwood curse, the crown ring, and the royal succession. She must be secured in the Silver Chamber until the council determines her risk. Silver Chamber. Emily's throat went dry. She had heard stories about those rooms in noble castles. Places for unstable wolves, disputed bloodlines, and people powerful men wanted to call dangerous before anyone could call them wrong. Nora stepped closer to Emily. Silver containment is for active threats. Victor looked at the glowing scar. That mark reacted to royal blood authority, dissolved auction claims, and calmed the king's curse from across a hall. What would you call that? A gift, Nora said. A threat, Victor answered. Adrian's alpha power darkened the corners of the room, not wild, not uncontrolled, but heavy enough that the council witnesses lowered their eyes. You will not put her in a chamber built to frighten confessions out of people who have not been heard. Victor's expression sharpened. Then bring her before the council now. Let every lord see what you brought into this castle after paying a kingdom's ransom. Let them decide whether your judgment is clouded. Emily flinched at the word brought. Adrian saw it. His voice went colder. Choose your words carefully. But Emily was already hearing the old pattern. At Ash Hollow, they had called her cursed before asking what happened. At the auction, they had called her damaged before asking what the scar was. Now Victor called her threat before anyone asked whether she wanted this power at all. Fear rose in her chest, familiar and choking. Then the scar warmed, steady and deep, and the woman's voice returned inside her memory. Hide the fire until the black-crowned wolf finds you. Emily looked at Adrian's back. He was protecting her, and a part of her wanted to stay there, behind the safest shadow she had ever known. But if she let him be the only voice, the council would say she was a weapon in his hand. If she hid again, Victor would make hiding look like guilt. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the cloak back over her shoulder and stepped around Adrian. He turned at once, not blocking her, only watching. Emily. The warning in his voice was not command. It was concern. She met his eyes. I cannot be defended into silence. Something in his face shifted, almost pain, then respect. He stepped aside. Victor noticed and smiled faintly, believing perhaps that she had just made herself easier to corner. Emily faced the council witnesses. Her breath shook, but her voice did not break. If I am dangerous, let truth prove it, not fear. Nora closed her eyes as if those words answered something ancient. The Moonfire scar brightened. The white glow spread in thin lines over Emily's shoulder, then faded into her skin like living script. Victor's smile disappeared. Very well, he said. The council chamber. Adrian moved to Emily's side. She walks there free. Under guard. Under witness, Adrian corrected. No restraints. No silver. No closed doors. Every word recorded by Royal Archive law. Victor's jaw worked, but he could not refuse without exposing why he wanted secrecy. The procession through Blackwood Castle felt longer than miles. Servants watched from archways. Guards lowered their heads to Adrian, then stared at Emily's faintly glowing scar with fear, wonder, and questions they did not dare ask. Emily kept her eyes forward. Her legs shook beneath her dress, but she did not stop. The council chamber opened beneath a ceiling painted with black wolves circling a moonstone crown. 12 council seats curved around a central floor. At the far end stood a sealed silver door, tall and smooth, with no handle on the inside. The silver chamber. Emily's stomach tightened. Victor gestured toward it. Until we understand her nature, caution requires containment. Adrian's hand curled at his side. No, Victor turned to the council. You see? The king refuses procedure when the girl is involved. A murmur moved through the seats. Emily felt the room beginning to turn, the way rooms always turned when important people spoke first. So she stepped into the center before fear could make her smaller. You want to know my nature? She said. The council fell silent. Emily looked at the silver chamber, then at Victor. My nature was shaped by people who named me before hearing me. Cursed, damaged, unsold, threat. Her breath caught, but she kept going. If your law can only understand me by locking me away, then your law is the thing that needs examination. The Moonfire scar flared so brightly the silver chamber door gave a low chime and went dark. The council stared. Adrian's eyes held hers with quiet pride. Victor's face hardened with something too close to fear. And somewhere deep beneath the castle, an old archive lock began to turn. The old archive lock turned beneath Blackwood Castle with a sound no one in the council chamber could mistake for ordinary stone. It came from below the floor, behind the walls, and somewhere inside the moonstone crown painted above them. A deep click that made every council lord sit straighter. Emily Carter stood in the center of the chamber with the silver door dark behind her and the Moonfire scar glowing beneath her dress like a secret answering its own name. Adrian Blackwood looked toward the far wall. The Royal Archive has not opened without a king's command in 3 generations. Nora Whitman's voice trembled. Then it is not opening for the king. Every eye turned to Emily. Her heart hammered so hard she could barely breathe. The room that had wanted to contain her now watched her, as if she had become the key to a locked kingdom. Victor Hale recovered first. Archive reactions are ceremonial. They cannot be used as evidence without council supervision. Adrian's mouth hardened. Then supervise. The far wall split along a seam hidden behind the painted black wolves, and a narrow stairway appeared, descending into white light. The council chamber went silent. Emily felt the pull of it through her scar, soft but undeniable, like a thread tied beneath her ribs. Adrian held out his hand, palm open but not touching. Only if you choose to go. That question, again. Choice where others would have given orders. Emily looked at the stairway, then at Victor. The council lord was watching her scar with the expression of a man seeing a sealed letter open in public. She placed her hand lightly in Adrian's, not because she needed to be led, but because she chose who would stand beside her when the truth came out. The archive below smelled of old parchment, cold stone, and moonlit dust. Shelves rose higher than the eye could follow, packed with ledgers, sealed boxes, and glass cases of royal contracts. As Emily stepped onto the floor, the crown ring on Adrian's hand pulsed. Her scar answered. Between them, a line of white fire crossed the archive and struck a locked cabinet marked Auction Authority Records. The cabinet opened by itself. Papers flew out in a storm of pale pages, circling the room without tearing. Nora caught the first ledger and read aloud. Mating auction transfer file. Subject, Emily Carter of Ash Hollow. Classification, scarred, rejected, low value, Omega. Emily flinched, but Adrian's hand remained steady near hers. Nora's face went pale as she continued. Recommended buyer. Alpha Grant Voss of Eastmere, bonded ally to House Hale. Victor's voice came sharply from the stairway. That file is incomplete. Nora turned the page. Payment guarantee issued before auction date. House Hale to compensate Eastmere upon successful acquisition. Secondary instruction. Prevent Blackwood Crown exposure. The archive went still. Emily looked at Victor, and the cold truth settled over her. The auction had not been a cruel accident. It had been arranged. She had not been placed there because she was unwanted. She had been placed there because the wrong person wanted her quietly. Adrian's voice was dangerously calm. You arranged for a puppet Alpha to buy her. Victor lifted his chin. I arranged stability. You arranged disappearance. The words struck the archive shelves, and several sealed boxes opened at once. More records spilled into the air. Ash Hollow testimony edits, Scar classification amendments, council recommendations, old Moonfire bloodline removals. Mason Reed and Vanessa Carter, summoned by royal order after the council hearing began, stood near the archive entrance with faces stripped of confidence. Mason stared at the edited testimony bearing his signature. This is not what I submitted. Nora's eyes flashed. No, but you submitted. Enough cruelty for someone to sharpen. Vanessa covered her mouth as one page floated before her, showing correspondence between her family and Hale officials. I did not know, she whispered. Emily looked at her. You did not have to know. You only had to enjoy that I was beneath you. Vanessa looked down, ashamed into silence. Another ledger opened before Adrian. The ink glowed black around one phrase, Blackwood Curse Dependency. Nora read slowly. If Moonfire heir is identified by crown proximity, remove from royal influence. Continued absence of Moonfire stabilizer ensures Blackwood curse progression and council dependency. Adrian went utterly still. Emily turned to him. She saw it then, not as rumor or royal burden, but as grief carried in silence. His curse had not merely worsened. It had been allowed to worsen. Victor had kept the cure away so the king would need the council. Emily's scar burned with sudden heat, not painful, but furious in a way her own fear had never been allowed to be. You knew what I was, she said. Victor's mask cracked. I knew what your bloodline could do if placed in sentimental hands. Adrian stepped forward. You mean free hands? Victor's eyes darkened. I mean uncontrolled. The word exposed him more than any record. Emily lifted her chin. I was never dangerous because of the scar. I was dangerous because I could prove you were lying. The archive answered with a burst of white light. Every auction record bearing her name dissolved its false classification, leaving only one line glowing in moonstone ink. Emily Carter, living Moonfire heir, unlawfully transferred. Victor stepped back, then raised his hand toward the black seal embedded in the archive wall. If she is so harmless, he said, voice ringing with desperation, let the throne itself judge her. Adrian's eyes widened. Victor, do not. Victor pressed the seal. Far above them, in the council chamber, the Blackwood throne curse awakened. A dark tremor rolled through the castle. The crown ring on Adrian's hand turned black as midnight. Shadow gathered around his shoulders in the shape of a great wolf, and every council lord stumbled away in fear. Victor pointed at Emily, triumphant and pale. There, let everyone see what happens when Moonfire stands too close to a cursed king. Emily looked at Adrian as the shadow deepened around him, and the scar on her shoulder blazed white in answer. The shadow around Adrian Blackwood did not rise like smoke. It unfolded like a living crown of darkness, stretching from the black ring on his hand to the stone walls of the archive, and then up through the open stairway toward the throne above. Emily Carter felt the tremor under her feet and heard the council chamber erupt in panic. Chairs scraped. Voices broke. Somewhere above, the silver chamber door rang like a warning bell. In front of her, Adrian stood rigid with one hand braced against the archive table, his jaw locked, his icy gray eyes darkening as the Blackwood curse wrapped itself around his shoulders in the shape of a massive black wolf. It was beautiful and terrifying, not because it wanted to destroy, but because it looked exhausted from years of being forced awake. Stay back, Adrian said through clenched breath. Even now, even with the curse crawling over him, his first command was not for power. It was for her safety. Emily's heart hammered. Victor Hale stood near the wall seal, pale but triumphant. You see it now. He called to the witnesses above and below. Moonfire provokes the curse. She endangers the king. The council lords stared from the stairway, frightened enough to believe the loudest voice in the room. Mason Reed stood frozen beside Vanessa Carter, both of them watching the woman they had once called damaged become the only person who did not step away. Emily looked at the shadow wolf. It did not snarl at her. It watched her as if it recognized the light in her scar and did not know whether to hope. Nora Whitman's voice trembled behind her. Emily, the old texts say Moonfire must be given freely. If fear guides it, the fire will not answer. Emily swallowed. Her throat felt dry, but the scar at her shoulder burned steady and warm. Not pain. Invitation. The woman's voice from her memory returned, clearer than it had ever been. Hide the fire until the black-crowned wolf finds you. Emily understood then. Her mother had not hidden a weapon inside her. She had hidden a choice. Emily took one step toward Adrian. The dark aura shifted, and several council lords gasped. Adrian's eyes sharpened with alarm. Emily, no. She stopped only long enough to meet his gaze. You asked before touching me. Her voice shook, but it carried. Now I am asking before touching the curse. Will you let me try? The archive fell silent. Even Victor's expression flickered because there was no law he could twist around that question. Adrian stared at her, the cursed shadow pulling at his breath, his control strained but unbroken. Only if you can step back the moment you want to. Emily nodded. I can. And only if you understand that you owe me nothing. The words almost undid her. After a life spent being treated as debt, burden, omen, and contract, he was still refusing to turn her gift into obligation. Emily's eyes stung. I know. She stepped closer. The shadow wolf lowered its great head. The moonfire scar flared beneath her dress, white light branching from her shoulder down her arm. Emily lifted her hand toward the crown ring, but stopped a breath away. I am not here because Victor wants proof, she said. I am not here because Ash Hollow called me cursed. I am not here because the auction sold my name. Her fingers trembled. I am here because I choose to know what my fire can do. Adrian's face softened through the strain. Then choose. Emily placed her hand over the crown ring. White fire met black shadow. The archive filled with light, so bright the ledgers glowed from within, but the fire did not burn her. It moved through the ring, through the curse, through the dark wolf aura wrapped around Adrian, not attacking it, but untangling the knot someone had tightened for years. Adrian drew one sharp breath. The shadow wolf shuddered, then lowered itself beside him like a tired guardian finally allowed to rest. Above them, the council chamber went silent. Victor's triumph vanished. No, he whispered. That is not possible. Nora began to cry softly. Not curse, she said. Cure. Emily felt the truth move through her scar and into the royal archive. The Blackwood curse had not feared Moonfire. It had been starving for it. The darkness around Adrian thinned, no longer a prison around his shoulders, but a quiet black aura standing at his back. He looked at Emily as if she had stepped into the part of him no throne had ever seen and returned holding light. Are you hurt? He asked. Emily let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. That is your first question? Always. The crown ring cooled beneath her palm. The moonfire scar settled into a soft silver glow. The council witnesses stared down from the stairway, stunned into speechlessness. Mason had gone pale. Vanessa's hand covered her mouth. Victor backed away from the wall seal as the archive records around him ignited with white lettering, exposing every false curse report he had filed. Adrian turned slowly toward the watching court, then lowered himself to one knee before Emily in the archive light. Gasps echoed from above. He bowed his head, not as a cursed king saved by a tool, but as a man honoring the woman who had chosen mercy when everyone expected fear. His voice carried through the castle. You mocked her as a scarred Omega. You sold her as unwanted. You called her dangerous because you needed her hidden. He lifted his eyes to Emily. But this court has insulted the future queen who just saved its king. The words future queen moved through Blackwood Castle like a bell no one had permission to silence. Emily Carter stood in the royal archive with her hand still near Adrian Blackwood's crown ring, the moonfire scar glowing softly beneath her dress, while the Alpha King remained on one knee before her. For one stunned heartbeat, the entire court forgot how to breathe. Then the council witnesses above began to lower their heads. One by one, the men who had called for containment, verification, and silver chambers bowed before the woman they had nearly locked away. Emily's fingers trembled at her side. She had been stared at before, measured, mocked, priced, but being honored felt stranger than all of it, almost harder to trust. Adrian rose slowly, not taking her hand until she looked at him and chose to give it. When she did, his grip was steady, warm, and careful. Nora Whitman stepped into the center of the archive with the old Moonfire book clutched against her chest. Her voice carried up the stairway and into the council chamber. By Royal Archive witness, Emily Carter is the last living Moonfire heir of the Guardian line once bound beside the Blackwood throne. Her scar is not a curse. It is a sealed inheritance. Her presence did not endanger the king. It quieted the curse illegally prolonged by concealed records. Victor Hale stood beneath the wall seal, his face stripped of color. Those records require formal review. Adrian's eyes cut to him. They are reviewing you. At that, the archive shelves answered. Ledger after ledger opened, casting white light over Victor's black council robes. False curse reports. Auction transfer orders. Correspondence with Eastmere. Amendments to Ash Hollow testimony. Every page removed another layer of the authority he had worn like armor. Mason Reed stepped forward from the archive entrance, his face pale. He looked at Emily, then at the glowing testimony bearing his signature. I thought I was telling the truth, he said, but the excuse died in his own mouth. Emily watched him struggle with the weight of what he had helped build. Her chest ached, but the ache no longer bent her. You told the part that protected your pride. Mason lowered his head. Yes. Vanessa Carter stood beside him, both hands clasped at her waist so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I wanted them to see you as less, she whispered. Because if you were less, I could be chosen without fear. Emily looked at the sister who had learned to smile, while others named Emily ruined. And now, Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Now I see that I was never chosen. I was only useful to people who needed you buried. The truth should have felt satisfying. Instead, it felt like watching a locked room fill with light and seeing how many people had lived there willingly. Nora turned another page. The Moonfire line carried the right to stand as royal witness in matters of curse, mating law, and public Omega judgment. A council elder inhaled sharply. That authority was removed. Erased, Nora corrected. Adrian faced the council above. By House Hale. Victor's voice sharpened. The kingdom needed stability. Emily stepped forward before Adrian could answer. The scar brightened, and all eyes returned to her. No. The kingdom needed obedience from girls who were easier to sell when they had no names left. The archive went silent. Even the pages stopped turning. Emily felt her heart hammer, but she did not look away from Victor. You did not put me in that auction because I was worthless. You put me there because I was valuable and alone. Victor's mouth tightened, and for the first time, he had no clean lie ready. Adrian turned to the court. Lord Victor Hale is removed from emergency authority pending full judgment. His seal is suspended. His guards are dismissed from council command. Victor stiffened. You cannot strip a council lord on the word of an auctioned Omega. The room went cold. Adrian's voice dropped. Say auctioned again as if it defines her, and you will lose more than a seal. Emily placed a light hand on Adrian's sleeve, not to stop him from protecting her, but to remind the room that she could speak for herself. Let him say it, she said. Everyone here should remember what they allowed. Adrian's anger did not vanish, but it obeyed her choice. That was the moment several council lords truly bowed, not to Moonfire power, but to the woman holding it. Mason sank to one knee. Emily, I am sorry. Vanessa followed, lower and quieter. I am sorry. Their apologies did not erase the auction stage, the years of silence, or the word damaged spoken like a sentence. But the court heard them. That mattered. Emily looked at the kneeling figures, then at the council, then at Adrian. Do not ask me to be future queen while another Omega can be brought to a platform and sold for tradition. Adrian's expression softened with pride, so open it made her breath catch. Name what you want. Emily lifted her chin. The mating auction law ends. Every active contract is reviewed. Every Omega held by debt or rejection penalty is released until they choose otherwise. Ash Hollow's testimony system is investigated. Eastmere's claim files are opened. And Victor Hale answers. Publicly, not behind council doors. Nora's eyes shone. Mason bowed his head lower. Vanessa covered her mouth as if finally understanding the size of what Emily was asking. Adrian took the crown ring from his hand and placed it on the open ledger beside Emily's glowing name. Granted as royal priority. The archive flared white. Above them, the council chamber doors opened to the court beyond, where nobles, guards, and witnesses had gathered in stunned silence. Emily saw the same kind of faces from the auction hall, but this time they lowered their heads when she stepped forward. Adrian stood beside her, not ahead. The Alpha King had paid a kingdom to break her chains, but now she was the one deciding what freedom would mean. She looked at him and spoke clearly enough for every witness to hear. Do not ask me to be yours until no Omega can be sold like I was. Adrian Blackwood did not answer Emily with a promise spoken softly for only her to hear. He turned to the open court doors, to the council witnesses, to Mason Reed kneeling in shame, to Vanessa Carter with tears on her face, to Victor Hale standing stripped of his seal beneath the white glare of the archive, and he made the answer law. Bring every active mating auction contract held under Blackwood recognition, he said. Now. The command moved through the castle faster than dawn. Clerks ran. Guards opened sealed rooms. Council elders who had spent years pretending tradition was untouchable now watched boxes of contracts arrive in the archive, stacked across the stone tables like proof of a kingdom's polished cruelty. Emily stood beside Adrian with the Moonfire scar glowing softly under her dress, her hands folded to hide their trembling. She had asked for the law to end, but seeing the names made the cost real. Dozens of Omegas, some from border packs, some from noble houses, some marked rejected, debt-bound, scentless, barren, unstable, unsuitable. Words that had once been used against her were written again and again in black ink, each one a little cage. Her throat tightened. Adrian saw her face and spoke before anyone could turn her pain into spectacle. No one reads a name aloud without consent. The nearest clerk froze, then bowed. Yes, Your Majesty. Emily looked at Adrian. He had understood without being told. That was the first small softness of the night, and it hurt more than she expected. Victor gave a bitter laugh from where two royal witnesses guarded him. You will collapse half the pack alliance system before breakfast. Adrian did not look at him. If half the system depends on selling people who cannot refuse, then it deserves to collapse before breakfast. Nora Whitman opened the first contract box and placed the crown ring beside it. By Blackwood royal authority and Moonfire witness, she said, voice steady with ceremony. All auction claims are suspended pending voluntary review. Emily stepped forward. Not suspended. The room turned to her. Her heart hammered, but she lifted her chin. Suspended means someone can wake tomorrow and argue about putting them back. Released first. Reviewed after. Let freedom be the starting point, not the reward. Silence followed. Then Adrian's eyes warmed with fierce pride. Released first, he said. Reviewed after. He took the moonstone quill and signed the first decree. Then he offered it to Emily. Not because he needed her power to make his law valid, but because the law had wounded her body and name before anyone else in that room had cared. Emily accepted the quill. Her fingers shook as she wrote her name beside his. Emily Carter, Moonfire Heir. The scar flashed white. Across the tables, contract seals opened one by one with soft chimes, not breaking violently, but unlocking like doors. Several servants outside the archive began to cry. Mason bowed his head to the floor. Vanessa whispered, all this because of her. Emily looked at her. No, she said quietly. All this because it should have been done before me. Vanessa had no answer. Adrian turned to the court. From this day forward, no mating auction may operate under Blackwood law. No Omega may be transferred by debt, rejection penalty, pack convenience, or mating classification. Any bond offer requires adult consent, private counsel, healer witness, and the right to refuse without punishment. The Moonstone archive blazed white, recording every word. Victor's face twisted. You are giving them power to shame alpha lines. Emily stepped toward him before Adrian could respond. No, we are taking away your power to shame everyone else. The court heard it. More importantly, they did not look away. When the final decree was signed, Adrian removed the crown ring from the ledger and turned fully to Emily. The room changed, not because the law was finished, but because everyone understood what question had waited behind it. Emily felt heat rise to her face. She was still in the same dress from the auction, still tired, still carrying more truth than one night should hold. Adrian lowered himself to one knee before her. But this time there was no curse, no archive command, no public reversal forcing the gesture. Only choice. Emily Carter, he said, his voice low but clear. I will not ask you to be mine because you carry Moonfire blood. I will not ask because you saved my life, or because this court needs a queen to make its guilt look noble. I ask because you stood in the center of every cruelty they built around you, and still asked first for the freedom of others. Her breath caught. Adrian's eyes held hers, steady and unguarded. I choose your voice before your power. I choose your courage before your bloodline. I choose the woman who could have demanded revenge and demanded justice instead. Will you allow me to court you, with no claim until you want one, no bond until you speak it, and no throne placed on your shoulders before you are ready to stand there? Emily could not breathe for a moment. The court around them blurred, but not from fear. From the sharp, impossible ache of being asked instead of taken. She looked at the contracts unlocking across the tables, at Nora's tearful smile, at Mason's bowed head, at Vanessa's silence, at Victor stripped of the control he had mistaken for law. Then she looked back at Adrian. Yes, she said, and the word felt like stepping off the auction platform forever. You may court me. Adrian bowed his head over her answer as if it were a crown. Emily reached down and placed her hand over the crown ring in his palm by her own choice. The Moonfire scar glowed. Softly, not as a wound, not as a chain, but as light finally belonging to her. The moment Emily Carter placed her hand over the crown ring in Adrian Blackwood's palm, the Moonfire scar gave one soft pulse, and every unlocked contract across the archive tables turned to pale ash. Not destroyed in anger, not hidden away, but released into the air like names finally allowed to breathe. The court stood in stunned silence while dozens of old claims vanished from the ledgers, and for the first time that night, Emily did not feel the room measuring her. She felt the room learning from her. Adrian rose from one knee, but he did not close his hand around hers until she chose to let her fingers remain. That small space between asking and accepting became the quietest victory of the night. Victor Hale saw it too, and his face twisted because he understood that control had failed where consent had succeeded. Nora Whitman opened the final archive record, its cover white with Moonfire thread and black with Blackwood sealwork. The truth of the scar is complete, she said, her voice carrying through the archive and the court beyond. Marin Carter, last guardian of the Moonfire line, sealed her daughter's inheritance after House Hale began removing Moonfire heirs from royal protection. The scar was not damage. It was a living seal. It hid Emily from those who would sell, silence, or use her. It waited for the black-crowned wolf not as a master, but as the one royal bloodline still bound by covenant to stand beside her. Emily closed her eyes for one breath. Her mother had not left her cursed. Her mother had left her hidden and alive. When she opened her eyes, Victor was already speaking. Old records can be interpreted many ways. Adrian's voice cut through the lie. Then the court will interpret them publicly. He turned to the gathered council, auction witnesses, Ash Hollow representatives, and noble packs now crowded in the open chamber. Lord Victor Hale arranged Emily Carter's transfer through the mating auction, concealed Moonfire records, altered testimony, prolonged the Blackwood curse, and attempted to confine the woman who could expose him. His council seal is revoked. His house authority is frozen. He will be sent to the Northern Archive Monastery to restore every record House Hale erased, under royal and Moonfire witness, for the remainder of his life. Victor went still, not because he accepted justice, but because no one stepped forward to save him. The men who had once bowed to his seal looked away. Vanessa Carter lowered her head, pale and silent. Mason Reed sank to one knee before Emily, his voice rough. Ash Hollow will reopen every rejection file. I will testify that I helped shame you because I was proud and afraid. Emily looked at him for a long moment. The girl he had rejected might have begged for that apology. The woman standing before him did not need it to stand tall. You will testify for every Omega your pack called broken, she said. Not only for me. Mason bowed lower. I will. Vanessa stepped forward next, tears shining but not asking for comfort. I envied what I did not understand. I helped them make you smaller. Emily's fingers brushed the scar that now glowed like moonlit silver. You did not make me smaller. You only proved how afraid people become when they cannot see what someone carries. Then she turned to the entire court. Her voice shook once, then steadied. I am not the scar they priced. I am not the shame they named. I am the fire they failed to bury. The Moonstone Archive answered with a white gold flare. Adrian's Blackwood aura arose behind him, no longer cursed shadow, but a calm black wolf presence beside her Moonfire light. He faced the court with his hand still open in hers. I choose Emily Carter before this kingdom, not because she saved my life, not because her bloodline strengthens my throne, and not because the court now understands her worth. I choose her because when she was given power, she used it to free others. If she chooses me in return, she will stand beside me as Luna and Queen, never beneath me. The court bowed. Emily looked at Adrian, at the man who had paid a kingdom to break her chains, and then waited for her voice before asking for her heart. I choose you, she said clearly. Not as my owner, not as my rescuer, but as the alpha who learned to ask, before claiming what he wanted. I choose the bond because it is mine to give. Only then did Adrian lift the crown ring between them. Emily placed her scarred hand over it, and their auras met, Moonfire white and Blackwood black, circling without consuming, joining without erasing. The mate bond settled gently, not as a chain, but as a vow both of them had spoken before witnesses. Weeks later, the mating auction halls across Blackwood territory were closed. Their stages became hearing courts where released Omegas reclaimed names, debts, and choices. Ash Hollow publicly corrected Emily's record and compensated those harmed by false rejection law. Eastmere lost royal recognition until every hidden transfer file was opened. Vanessa served under Nora Whitman, restoring Moonfire history, and Mason spent years helping reopen pact testimony he once trusted too easily. Victor Hale lived out his sentence in the Northern Archive Monastery, surrounded by the names his house had tried to erase, writing them back into kingdom record one by one. The Blackwood curse never returned. Under Emily's Moonfire witness and Adrian's changed law, the throne no longer fed on secrecy, fear, or council control. Marin Carter's name was carved into the Hall of Guardian Queens, and beside it, Emily placed the first silver rose with steady hands. On the first winter dawn after her coronation, Emily stood beneath the Moonstone throne in a white and silver gown that left her scar uncovered. Adrian stood beside her, his crown ring now carrying both Blackwood shadow and Moonfire light. The court that had once watched her go unsold knelt before her as Luna, queen, mate, and free woman. Emily looked over them without trembling, her scar shining brighter than any jewel. At last, the mark they had called a curse had become the crown they could no longer deny.